attendance.
Becky Beisel,
Here.
Brian Davis,
Present.
Lisa Hedin,
Here.
Scott Gergen,
Here.
Stephanie Malm, here. Dave Pemble,
Here.
and Kelsey Waits.
Here. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Lisa.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. All right, so next up is an approval of the minutes from the March 24th, March 25th, March 30th, March 31st, April 2nd, and April 8th board meetings.
So
Do we
moved.
have a motion?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
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 Same sign? Carries. All right, so we have the superintendent's memo for everyone to take a look at. Kind of going over the agenda and Jeff's recommendations.
And what Becky attempted to do in detail this month, and I think she did partially last month, was embed the actual recommendations in the action items. So
Yeah.
one less thing you have to flip back and forth towards, then you see what the recommendation is. I think they came through there pretty clear, did they, Becky?
I think so.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated that. Thanks, Becky. I spent time going through things this morning and just reviewing, and it was very helpful to have that superintendent recommendation right in the notes of the agenda item.
Yes, thank you for all of your hard work, Becky. We really appreciate it. You're just on top of everything. All right, and so then at this point, we will recognize any visitors who happen to be signed on, or if you're watching on Facebook or from home once this video is posted, welcome. We would also like to acknowledge correspondence from Chris Tyken as well. So announcements and recognitions, good news items.
All right, well, we could use some good news. So a late breaking one here. There's a group that's formed called Hastings COVID-19 Birthday Parades. And I don't know much about them, but they delivered donuts to the district office yesterday, and that was delicious. So they're out spreading good cheer, and we'll probably hear from them again. Other items here on the more formal side. The Hastings Public Schools have been honored with the Best Communities in Music Education designation from the National Association of Music Merchants Foundation for its outstanding commitment to music education. This designation has been awarded this year to only 11 school districts in Minnesota. It confirms Hastings' outstanding achievement and efforts to provide music access and education to all students. Let's hear it for the Hastings music programs. Moving on, it was announced last week that the Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund has awarded 6 individual classroom-based grants totaling $28,329. In addition, grants have been provided in the amounts of $12,000 for the Adopt a Classroom projects, which will be identified by principals at the sites. Also, $23,000 for high school senior scholarships. $10,000 to forgive unpaid student lunch account debt. So we recognize not only in our normal donation acceptance, but the special recognition for the Doffing Fund for their generous grants. All right, and now the moment we've been waiting for, at least our guests have been waiting for. We want to congratulate the Hastings Public Schools Employees of the Semester. And so some of them have logged on, and I will read their names, and then I'll turn it over to the chair if there's anything else that we want to do for recognition there, but we'll read their names and their position. So we have Rachel Hayter, media specialist at the high school. We have Danelle Lewis, special services secretary for the district. And we have Megan Loesch, the Kids Campus Lead, who has been a key part of our childcare program. So she works in community ed and is helping out every day with childcare over at Pinecrest. Speaking of helping out, we have Chris Mommer, the cook manager from the high school, representing that whole food service team that's just doing an unbelievable job, just like the childcare folks are. And the other of our big three things that we have going on in the district is our distance learning. So we're recognizing Jen Reichel, the Director of Teaching and Learning for the district, and of course, all those people who are working with her on providing distance learning. And she's also been a cheerleader and communications organizer for daily leadership team stuff. So great job, Jen. And Bobby Selesky, the Dean of Students for the middle school, playing, I think, all kinds of different roles in this upside down world of education. So those are the employees of the semester. Madam Chair.
Yeah. So I know that this is not typically how we do employees of the semester, but thank you so much for everything that you do for our district and for all of your hard work. And we truly appreciate each and every one of you. And I know I've gotten a chance to work with some of you individually, not all of you, but I know that you do great work, and thank you. So,
I wanted
do you have
to,
some-
yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, Employee of the Semester is always a really meaningful award. I mean, you're nominated by people that you work with on a day-to-day basis and are recognized by that. But I really reflect on the people that were selected, identified, and selected this particular semester. And to me, it speaks to some really key characteristics. One, have an amazing work ethic. You're sort of the social capital and the leadership capital that you've built up over your time here that's allowed you to be recognized and deal with the really unique challenges that are being thrown at you. It really speaks highly. Your recognition at this time really speaks highly to that. And then an ability to think on your feet and problem solve in real time, which is just been outstanding across the board. So thank you very much. This is a special recognition, and you guys received it at a special time, and it's really should be super meaningful to you. I know it is to me.
Thank you for everything you're doing. Okay. Well, so then next up, we are moving into our items for discussion, and employees of the semester, please feel free to continue to stay on this school board meeting if you have not zoomed out enough in the past couple weeks, or feel free to go enjoy this beautiful, almost 70-degree night outside.
And feed your children.
Hi. All right. So items for discussion will begin with the status of outdoor facilities use.
All right, so I'll preface or make an introduction for items for discussion here by clarifying that there was a conference call with the commissioner today. I think most of the superintendents that were on there were anticipating that she would make an announcement about the end of the school year. It was kind of predicted to be the day. And instead, what she said was the last executive order indicates the staff will return on May 1st and prepare for students on May 5th. But most of the meeting was spent talking about, now that you've done distance learning once before, how would you do it next fall? So the range on those two options are wider than anybody anticipated. And she got a lot of, so cheerful messages back from superintendents about, we'll roll with whatever you tell us, but please tell us. It's getting really hard to not know what's happening this summer, what's happening with this fall. So please move that up. So these discussion items that we have are classified as discussion for this meeting, either because they were tied to an announcement that we were hopeful of getting today, and then we could move forward on them. So they're still discussion items because we don't have any definitive answer yet on return to school, other than the executive order says May 1st, students come back on May 5th. The likelihood of that is almost none, but that's what she reinforced today. That's still the current executive order. So on these discussion items, they're either too new for me to recommend them as an action item, or they're tied to the word that we haven't heard yet. Keep in mind that if directors would like to move any discussion item to action, they certainly have in the parliamentary procedural options to try to see if there's support to do that. Anyway, we'll begin with the status of facilities. And once again, many of these items were talked about at the last work session. We've had some recommendations about the status of outdoor facilities and just all of our facilities in general. The last word that all of our leadership team and our staff received was that as we move on with distance learning and our food service and our childcare, only the people who need to be reporting to work have to report. Those that have an option, we actually prefer that they not show up at school unless they need something, like they need better internet access or access to their curriculum materials or whatever. But they certainly have the option of coming to school, but we want them to minimize their footprint so that if there is word that they became ill, we can focus our cleaning efforts into the area, retrace their footsteps. So nothing has changed since then. We've heard that around the district, there's been occasional use that maybe isn't the healthiest or isn't what was intended by that direction. A couple items have come up this week that have been addressed directly with the leaders that we need to. So, and I know that you heard from Trent Hanson, the AD, at the work session that he would, at that time, in favor of closing down all the district outdoor facilities as well. My take on it right now is that we should react to the individual issues because we don't have any confirmation of how the school year is going to end. That if we're not having problems, we don't need to put a blanket plan across everything, but just continue to react to issues one at a time. But once again, that was a work session. So if that's something that the board would like to talk about now or move to a more formal item, time to do that.
I do have one question that was brought up to me this past week, and that is the use of the athletic facilities in the high school, the weight room and such, because that is still being used. And so what is the stance on that, since those facilities in general are closed down? And also, if, like you said just a couple minutes ago, the executive order says no one should be showing up to school facilities unless absolutely necessary, is a weight room something to show up to? Is that necessary?
You know, that directive to come only for what you need and to minimize your footprint, that stands. We addressed that in our leadership team meeting today, and we let them know that this was a discussion item for tonight. And if people thought that they, at their individual site, that they needed to tighten something up, to go ahead and get in front of that rather than waiting for direction from the school board, such as all district facilities, indoor and outdoor, are closed until we have further direction, something like that. I said that's always a possibility. So I anticipate that there's going to be a correction wherever it's necessary based on that discussion today, but I can't guarantee that. And I'm counting on those individual site managers to supervise their own sites. I know the first week that we were in transition from staff reporting to going home, I know that the weight room at the high school was used, and it was talked about that even though they're disinfecting, that's probably not going to be the healthiest plan moving forward. It wasn't until this week that it came to my attention again that it's probably being used, and that was addressed with the high school administration. So, once again, it depends on, how wide of a, board directive do we want to give people, or are we comfortable with just problem solving each item that potentially pops up? Works, but like I said, for some reason this week there were a couple of things having to do with Todd Field and the weight room that where people were getting too loose on that directive, and it needed to be addressed. And I've heard back from administrators that told me that they did actively address those.
Scott?
That we have our athletic director, Trent Hanson, on the line, so I'd like to hear from him what the plans are for the weight room.
Hey, how's it going? Give me 1 second. I'm walking around my house. That's why I don't see me yet. There you go. Just want to be respectful to me. I've swapped 3 times in the last half hour. The weight room use that I'm aware of is about 5 adults that are there, being, Mike and myself. We don't have it open to students or athletes or anything like that. It was people that were in the building. And so running through Mike, and I think he's had individual conversations in that regard, but just to clear it, if people were wondering, like, that we're talking adult staff that are on site already, not open to kids or visitors or anybody like that. Field was, unless there was something new this week, Todd Field, I got a couple calls, about 10 days ago that, kids are jumping the fence is basically what they're doing. And so when we know about it, we address it, knee deep into that one, but hopefully our cameras will be operational down there soon, and that can help deter that and really deal with it. Visible place, but yet someone still has to get down there to if kids actually do that. So that's what that was.
That helps clarify.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? So it sounds like the outdoor facilities, we haven't seen like a regular pattern of lots of people using them or anything like that.
We've seen use, and nothing, I think very rarely has it attracted anybody's attention as it's too big of a group or they're not using it the way they should be. Walkers, people trying to exercise, very little use that I've seen on any baskets here. I've seen it in city parks, but not here. Playgrounds are all taped off and closed, and I haven't heard of people violating that. So, like I said, right now it seems like we can address these issues one at a time as they pop up. But you only have a meeting once a month, so you kind of have to use a crystal ball to, do you want to take more assertive action, now in anticipation that maybe people will get stir crazy and get out more.
Right, Lisa?
My understanding from the conversation at the work session is we don't necessarily need to take, this wasn't a piece that needed board action, but that Trent brought the conversation forward to hear the sense of the board. So I'm not concerned about the regularity or irregularity or space of time between our meetings. Feel the issue should be dealt with on an as needed basis until a trend is identified, and then should be engaged with and stopped. It is disappointing to hear that adults are choosing to use our weightlifting facilities. That seems like a footprint nobody needs to make in the building, but I appreciate that that's being resolved. But I don't know that I don't feel like I need to make a statement or would need to take action as a board beyond keep an eye out for trends, engage when necessary, and if something has to happen, the authority exists within the administration.
Brian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Trent, do you think you might be able to update a little bit? I know I had sent you a note on if the city is basically taking a wait and see attitude as well. I'd just be interested in how the city is going to approach this, because even though it's not directly to your point, it doesn't seem that we're using our facilities. We are still part of a community, and I'm interested in how the city is approaching it, because as you can see, the weather is about to change significantly. And one of the reasons we haven't seen a lot of activity is because the weather hasn't been that wonderful.
And I was in touch last week with our Parks and Rec folks. And so right now their green space is still open. Even, like basketball courts are still open. They do have signage up. I'm not sure if any of you have happened to notice that, but in the one closest to me, I think it's direct, and yet it's not trying to be threatening, but it's, hey, if you're abiding by the distancing requirements and doing it right, you can enjoy this space. If it starts to be a problem, then we'll have to take different action. So we are currently consistent with the city in terms of not anything other than the actual playground. So we're in lockstep, and then we've just got the agreement that we're going to stay in touch. And if they feel like they're compelled to take a step, they're going to let me or us know, and vice versa. So pretty good spot in that regard.
Comments or discussion?
just really quick here. Yeah, I don't want to see our green space closed. But as like Brian had mentioned, as the weather changes, if we do see an uptick in that, how, I trust Trent to make a decision, and Jeff to make a decision on if that does need to be closed, if people are not in compliance with the social distancing directive.
And I guess, in my opinion, I would say that weather improves, if we start to see this pattern and this trend of a lot of people being there or using the facilities in ways that, we're not advised to right now. I don't think we need to wait for the city to make that decision. I am comfortable with us leading the city on that decision and letting them know what we have chosen to do. I don't think we need to wait for them to make the decision first. Head nods with that one. So, okay.
The only other thing I might chime in on is I can I'll do the best job I can, and Mike and I kind of keeping an eye on that. Of course, we're not out there 24 hours, but when we are there and kind of make those trips around, and I certainly would keep Jeff, starting with Jeff or the balance of, I'd keep everybody informed before we took a step, even if we felt like we were ready to take one. So if we see this trend where we've suddenly got 100 kids out there every day, I'm not just going to blast out something on Twitter in 5 seconds. I'd make sure I touch base with everybody first, just to make sure that. So I just want to add that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So next up is potential for high school parking lot refunds for the spring. And so, like Jeff had mentioned, the next couple, we don't know whether school's closed or not, so we won't be making any decisions most likely right now. But
B and C, we've provided an analysis of the dollars behind any refund. And I will share a similar guidance to what I did at the work session. I think that once we have a decision on the end of the school year, we can address the parking lot, that we would prorate the parking lot permits based on how many days they actually were able to use it for that period. And then that students or their families would have to actively request a refund. If they didn't request a refund, we would keep that. And that would tie into C, because we could, once there's an announcement about school, or if we want to be proactive, we could also make the announcement that potentially we are going to honor all of our activity and athletic coaching stipends for the year. If we did that, you could see in that analysis what the impact would be. The parking lot is a little bit more straightforward, and we could certainly take the approach that you're welcome to park there the entire rest of this season. Even though there's no school, you paid for a parking permit and you can park there. I think the natural thing would be to offer refunds for the part of the year that we didn't have school. The activities fees is far more complicated because we have paid a good portion of those stipends already. They are Schedule C of the master agreement. And as you can imagine, there's absolutely no language in there as to what to do if you shut down the schools for, a season. That may be something that this district and other districts, when they do negotiations again, actually write some language in there about what you do with those stipends. Meanwhile, I know that varsity coaches and some of the other activities have actively been doing distance learning connection with students. Middle school, much less, and that was not really directed to them to be actively involved in distance learning. So that's something that if we wanted to take action proactively, we could be more prescriptive about what the coaches should do. If we want to make a decision like some other districts who were looking at budget deficits already for next year, Prior Lake and Shakopee are two good examples. They just proactively prorated or canceled the stipends for the coaches. I'm quite confident their master agreement does not have any language in there for that, and they're going to claim that it's a need thing. I think the amount of money you save by trying to claw back any money from coaches is not worth the bad will that it creates. And you can look in there; it's tens of thousands of dollars, but it's not super substantial loss because of the savings that we're having in activities by not running buses, not paying officials, and that type of thing. So once again, to repeat reinforce what I shared at the work session, I believe that if we get word on the cancellation of spring sports, which should be right around the corner, that we should allow families to request a refund, but they have to actively request it. Otherwise, we keep the fees and we let people know that unclaimed parking lot fees and unclaimed activities fees are actually being used to pay these stipends for those coaches and advisors. So that's a recommendation. It's obviously we're not at an action item unless somebody wants to turn it into one. But I just want to put that out there again for the record. I hope we'd be actually off a decision today, but we're not.
So since we are continuing to pay all of the coaches, is there a way to get or to make sure that they're all engaging with the students in some way, even if that's, like my kids for swim team, one of them's a first grader. Obviously, that's not feasible. I mean, to be doing real practice. But they still have been doing Zooms in order to build that team connection and let the kids kind of still come together, talk about what they want to do next season and things like that. Just somehow engaging kids with their team in some way.
If we acknowledge that we are not going to claw back any stipends from anybody, that they're going to get their full stipends, that it's an investment in the programs long term, that everything on Schedule C is a very low hourly rate for the effort that people put in, and that we're not going to, nitpick that at a difficult time like this. I think then if we're sending that message that the follow-up should be, but we'd really like you to reach out and contact these kids and talk about what they can be doing safely to continue on in their sport and their activity and have the social connection, which is half of what kids go into an activity for anyway, is a social connection. It just hasn't been, because it was so uncertain as we wait for a final word, it just wasn't clearly communicated at the middle school level. And Trent, I could see is still on there, and I think he could certainly reinforce what he talked about at the work session, that there have been expectations for the varsity programs to connect, and some of the board directors maybe have personal anecdotes about seeing it happen.
Yeah, I can't speak to the middle school piece. If we should, we don't need to take an action item at this time because we don't have any other clear direction from the state. But I personally would support continuing to pay the stipend, continuing to expect coaches to engage with their teams through the end of the calendar, whatever that calendar might look like. And I've very actively seen that at the high school level. And I suppose the question at hand is at middle school, but if it wasn't clearly communicated to them as a thing that they should be doing, it's hard for me to say treat them differently. Maybe ask them to engage from this point forward.
Yeah, I agree. Brian?
The middle school coaches had a Zoom call with Pete McInnes, the athletic director there, and they were directed to, as best they can, engage with the athletes in their respective sports the same way the high school was. Maybe not at quite an advanced level, but certainly touch base with them. For example, with track, you've got over 150 kids, so it gets a little bit sticky in terms of that, but I know that there was a Zoom call and there was instruction given.
Was that at the same time as the high school coaches? I mean, was that right when we were starting
it was
to go into distance learning?
Yes, it was toward the beginning of the contract. The contracted spring term, which started on March 20th to May 20th. So it was somewhere in that first week, 2 weeks of that period of time. It was some time ago now.
Do we have any more comments at this time? If you're on mute.
I was just sharing that the middle school was really under the belief that they might be able to have a shortened or intramural season, and they were just waiting to pack it all into that. And now we know that that's just not going to happen. So actively expecting them to connect socially, give healthy exercise plans and whatnot. And we know also activities too can do alternate formats of their activities, especially when they know, hey, we're going to pay the stipend. Please do whatever you can to be a part of this holistic distance learning experience.
I think right now the plan sounds good and we just keep waiting. But does anyone else want to add anything? Becky?
I just think we need to make it very clear to everybody that the refunds are available if needed. An email needs to go out no matter if they've been talking to the kids or not, because I have a middle schooler who was involved in a high school golf, but he's a middle schooler. He's doing what he can, but he's not as engaged as much as if I was getting the emails and be like, hey, are you doing golf today? So I think, so they don't come around and next fall and say, well, I didn't get the refund like somebody else did. Can I have this as a credit for next year because I didn't get that this somebody else did? So I just think it needs to be really known to them that, hey, this is offered to you. If you don't take it, don't take it. But it's offered to you but it has to go out to everybody that it's offered if needed, if and when we get to there. Middle school, high school, wherever.
So once again, it's a choice whether we want to just do it now proactively or wait till we get the word. I think either one works. We just want to all be on the same plan here.
I guess I don't know, the likelihood of it back up and letting us do sports, I know is next to zero, but at the same time, I kind of want to hold that tiny, however minuscule bit of hope that I have there. Trent?
Yeah, I would just add that, minimally what we can do is prep the communication, right? Knowing that if the in-person piece is canceled, then the board's decision would likely be to offer people a refund if they actively request it. At least that gives my office a nudge that we can communication, prep the website, kind of, it obviously wouldn't go live until, but if you guys are comfortable with that, that would give me some good direction, at least to prepare.
I think that's a great idea. Becky?
I want to hold out to that nudge too, but I also want these families to know if they need that money back, they can get that money back. If somebody needs that $150 back, that to them too. And we're holding out hope because you never know. May 4th, they can open back up and we're all ecstatic, but it's a slim to none chance it's going to happen. So just to know that if and when it's available, they can have that money back if they need it.
Dave?
I think that, I agree that it's important if folks need the money back, that maybe that information should go out. But, May 4th is going to come, and even if something miraculously changes and there's some type of interaction that is going to be allowed, it's not going to fall into, the same old routine, I guess is the way I'd look at it and say, okay, acknowledges that the Schedule C says we're going to pay the stipend, and we need to acknowledge and say, as we move forward, that the refund is probably, the action item that's going to happen. But right now, it's like, okay, we should deal with the refund business on a case-by-case basis, and Trent can tell us whether or not he's getting a lot of those, or if there's a real process that needs to be addressed ahead of what the state guideline is going to say. That would be my thought.
Scott?
I think we pay our coaches. In some sports, I know we have problems attracting and retaining coaches. So if they're engaging with the kids, even at a minimal level, I think we need to recognize that. That's thought number one. Thought number two is even if by some miracle we are able to have some type of spring sport, you have to be cognizant that there's going to be families that aren't going to feel comfortable with sending their students to that. So whether we have the sport or don't have the sport, if by some miracle we are able to, have some semblance of a spring season, we need to be just as graceful in returning those fees for families that choose, that now choose not to participate. When they signed up, this wasn't an issue. Now, maybe it is. So we need to recognize that.
I think that's a really good point, both for families who may be in a different financial situation than they were at the beginning of the year, and also if they don't feel comfortable due to the pandemic, just being in close proximity to others and how everyone is feeling individually. I think that's an important point.
Yep, and I think, and I know this is an assumption, but I just want to absolutely ensure that we're keeping people's privacy at this time as well, because I don't want anyone to feel like, maybe they have 3 kids in multiple spring sports or something, and their bill is at the max or whatever the case is. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't reach out and get that refund, that, what is so-and-so going to say, or my name's going to be somewhere. I don't want to know the names. I'm sure none of us do. So just to ensure that people understand that their privacy will be respected in this matter, just like it is in those cases where we offer, participation fee whatsoever. Same deal.
Yeah, and technically, if we apply the current activities handbook, if we say the season hasn't started, which it hasn't, they can ask for that now. They don't have to give a reason why, financial hardship or whatever. They can just say, we're not doing it this year. So they've had that option all along. This is just the communication to make sure that's crystal clear to people that they'll have to actively request it. Otherwise, they're supporting the coaches' stipends with their fee. That's the plan in theory for right now.
Any other comments?
I'd say that's workable. Trent, just keep a handle on it and move forward.
Okay. So the next step is status of official newspaper designation. I'm sure we've all heard that the Hastings Gazette will be ending publication next month.
So I believe that we probably don't want to spend much time on it now, but at the next work session, we can share with you what the options are. I'm fairly confident that Hastings will qualify as posting our official postings on our website, but we've got to dig through every statute and all the modifications that are coming up now under the pandemic and see what actually applies to Hastings. And if there's multiple options, we'll present them to you at a work session. Seems like a better use of our time than debating the obvious right now that we won't, once the Gazette ceases publication, we'll have to have an alternate plan.
I think that's a smart move. We just play it by ear and move forward with where we're at now.
Right, that sounds good. So we'll get that in more detail next month. All right, so our last discussion item is the District Mental Health Task Force.
Can I introduce it, please?
Oh, yep.
Yep, so I just want to introduce Jen Subert, and I had a talk before the meeting here. This was for this task force to come up with the preliminary recommendation for the work session, and they did that despite the change in meeting procedure. And so now they've updated that, and there's a cost out on it. I just want to, before we turn it over to the directors to interact with Sarah, Dave, and anybody else that they need to, I just want to reinforce that we're anticipating, no matter what happens this school year, our budget is going to close similar to what we thought it would, because we're retaining that ADM for our students. We haven't been losing students. We don't think we're going to lose them. We're going to have to address community education, or you'll get a recommendation for action to address community education. But food service and most other things in the general fund are going to work out fine this year. it's next year that has question marks over it. We don't know what the school year looks like. We don't know if we'll get full funding for students. We know virtually nothing. So that's why this is as a discussion item. If you choose to proceed to move it to an action item ahead of knowing about next year, you're potentially putting expenses into a budget that we don't know what our revenues are. So I think proceeding with caution is great. It's what was intended with this task force. I just want to highlight that part, that as uncertain as this year sounds, it's really not this year that budgetarily is uncertain. Next year absolutely is.
Okay, thank you. And so Dave, if you want to kind of go over everything and then we'll see if we have questions.
Sure. So as you probably saw, first of all, thanks for having us back here again. And as you probably saw in the handouts that I forwarded to you that are in the budget agenda, like largely what you have in front of you in terms of the narrative is similar to what we discussed at the April 8 work session. I just put it in a different format. And so Kelsey and others, do you want me to go through the different points of the existing services that are kind of part of the whole picture? Or do you want me to get right to the recommendations at the end? I'm happy to do either one.
I feel comfortable going to the recommendations. Does anyone want to hear kind of that or?
Recommendations, Dave.
Okay, perfect. I included the other things, and we can circle back to that if you really want to have a broader picture, but we thought included in the broader picture would be good context, because I wanted you to be aware as board members and as the community as a whole of a lot of the things that we have in place that address mental health right now that are existing or have changed or been revised, but were already included in the 2021 budget as we are moving forward. So as we get down to the budget additions, we have recommended basically 2 FTE at the secondary level, 1 FTE at each counseling office. So at the middle school, it would be adding a counselor. And at the high school, it would be reassigning the school psychologist to be kind of a tier 1, tier 2 person, and then hiring behind the current school psychologist to do more of a true school psychology role. In meeting with both of those buildings, those were not only the preferences to address kind of the tier 1 and tier 2 mental health needs, but it also makes the counseling office kind of 6 FTE each in each of those buildings. They just do it a little bit differently. The middle school will have their social worker back in a full capacity, along with the 4 counselors, and the high school would end up having 5 counselors and 2 school psychologists essentially, but the second school psychologist would be in a quasi social worker-y type role, if I can use that term. And then the other 2 FTE that we would be adding would be at more of a tier 3 type level, where we are recommending adding 2 more TAP therapists to our district to be able to help provide true mental health therapy to kids that need it through our therapeutic assistance program with Canvas Health. The nice thing about those 2 FTE is that they roughly cost about, I think, $14,000 per therapist, because we bill most of those services through the Department of Human Services grant. So we just pick up part of the cost of those therapists. So we get a lot of bang for the buck when it comes to students that have a heavy degree of therapy needs in our district. And we have long waiting lists at both the elementary and the secondary level for those kids. So adding 2 more to our existing 2.8 FTE of therapists in the district actually makes it a little more robust on that side. So I think it does kind of comprehensively address some tier 1, 2, and 3 type services for now in a short-term fashion, while doing that in a relatively modest way. I think every district can always use more in a lot of different areas. And so if you ask every building, what could you use? You could get a long answer to that question. But I think right now, I think it tackles what we need to in the short term in some key areas, while we look to take a longer look at this in the future.
All right, thank you. Have any questions with that? I think one of my first questions would be, given what Jeff had said before then, what would be the effect if we wait until next month to make this decision, or if we should have it this month for an action item? What would your thoughts be on that?
Well, I can tell you, I mean, Sarah and I have been really busy on the special ed side of things when it comes to interviewing and hiring right now. it is not only prime hiring season, but we're getting to the sunsetting of prime hiring season. So by putting this off a month, and I'm not trying to rush your decision, I'm just trying to answer your question as objectively as possible, Kelsey, is that we're going to miss that window with some of the best candidates. So for example, for the high school position, if we do backfill the reassigned school psychologist by trying to find another school psychologist, school psychs are some of the hardest to find right now. We were very fortunate to land a school psych this week to replace the person who resigned from JFK Elementary School. I was surprised that we were able to replace her as quickly as we did. That's kind of rare. We actually have a couple of people from those same interviews that we could consider for the reassigned role at the high school if we had to right now. So I think by waiting, we risk losing good people.
Thank you.
Dave, you kind of alluded to this right at the tail end of your presentation. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you said, this would help us now, and then we could look at what we're doing going forward. By going forward, are you talking the year after that? Are you talking 2 years later? I know it's hard to have a crystal ball, but are you looking at this as being something that would be a 2021 thing, or is it a 21-22? I guess at least through 21-22. Do you have any perspective on that?
Honestly, I think the maybe the clearer answer to that question would be when we can sit down this summer or fall with as an admin team along with the new superintendent to be able to determine like what part of the social, emotional, and mental health piece of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 services is part of a larger systemic plan to address our students in the classroom. And I think that's got to be part of a larger picture with how tier 1 services, for example, is supposed to be addressing 80 to 85% of the students in our schools right now. And until we can have the talk about how we're going to do that in a consistent and systematic way with regard to what we're going to use and how we're going to implement it, and do that across different levels and how that's part of a larger plan. It's hard to know like when I can tell you like when we could have a really good comprehensive look at this, Brian. I think we could probably look at our current supports sooner than that to say, are we overlapping in some areas, or can we make some tweaks and adjustments in some areas? But I think that's exactly what those things are, is they're going to be tweaks and adjustments until we can look at the bigger picture, have some clear definitions to that. So I think we can do that in a planned out way in the next 1, 2, and 3 years, probably in a stair-step fashion as we continue with those talks. But it's going to start with making, strategic planning a priority at some point soon so that we can have this be part of that plan.
Thank you, Dave. That's a great answer. Thank you.
You bet.
At these numbers and what the pandemic is happening now, do you think this is going to help you for all the setbacks that we're having now and then getting into our next school year if and when we start back in September? Is this these numbers, or this is gonna help you? Do you think this will help you back in September with all we've reached the goal, we've missed a lot, what's going on right now? Will these numbers help you for all that, plus what we have going on in the continuing school year?
Are you, just so I understand the question, are you kind of asking, can we make up, are you worried about some of the students coming back and having some negative effects mentally and social emotionally from this?
Yes, making up from what we've missed, plus to dealing with what we are going to have continuing. Yes.
Boy, I don't know. Obviously we're in uncharted territory when it comes to what we're going to deal with when we have students come back through our doors. I mean, we have a lot of students right now that when typical school is in session, they really struggle with the pace, with what's expected of them in the classroom, a whole host of things. And so but at the same time, some of those same students, they find comfort in being here because this is a really stable, structured environment, and they need that as well. And so we don't know what kind of effect this is going to have. I can't imagine it's going to be less busy for for any services, whether it be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, when students do come back. I think, obviously student behavior and And that topic has been a hot topic this school year and the past couple of school years. And so, having kids stay regulated and ready to learn is always a hot topic. I think it's going to be no different this fall, Becky. So having extra supports in place, even if it's relatively modest supports like we're talking about here, is going to be helpful as we look to address it as a team.
That's what I was wondering. Like, so if we keep this agenda item now, that'll help you stay on track for the fall. So if we don't, push this back a month, this will kind of keep you on track for the next year as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Scott?
Yeah, I'd like to give Dave and team as much runway as possible to get that school psychologist on board if this is what we're going to do. You're going to have new people coming on board. So I think if this is our we talked about tactical and strategic. If this is our tactical solution, I'm ready to implement. That's my thoughts.
I'm ready. Recognizing that we're still working on that strategic piece, that this is part of a much larger conversation that we're having.
Yep.
If I may, Kelsey, I completely agree. I think until we tackle, and Mike, I talked to Mike earlier today too, and we want to reemphasize again from our group, until we tackle tier one and the consistency that's needed within tier one as part of a larger plan, we're going to continue reacting by creating additional tier two, tier three, and special ed services for students that might not need those if our tier one is implemented correctly. And so that it is incumbent upon us to actually make that the biggest priority as we move into the next year.
And then Lisa, I saw your hand up, and then Dave as well. So Lisa.
Okay. Thank you. I definitely want to support what both Kelsey and Scott said. We knew this was happening. We knew this was coming. We had made a commitment to support it in the current school year. This is not the way we want to be operating. We don't want to be in vacuum kind of decisions, but we've been on this track for a while, and I'm fully supportive of this proposal and putting it forward, giving our team time to get ready. And then many businesses are, I think, and institutions and individual families are looking at their finances, and 2020-21 is unclear. I acknowledge that, and I have that exact same feeling. I think we're ready. We've put ourselves in a financial position where we're ready, and we acknowledge that next year has to be about a strategic plan and get ahead of the game where we are right now on our budget development. So I would anticipate and I expect that we will be deficit spending next year. And knowing that, moving forward with this. And then again, just to echo what Kelsey said, I feel too that this is a multi-year and maybe no end game time. And it's not a multi-year keep adding staff. It's a multi-year, how do we wrap our students? How do we wrap them in supports? How do we prepare our tier one responses, which in many cases are classroom teachers? How do we prepare them through training and curriculum to support our students that they see every day and are in contact with every day? So this is not a surprise to me. I totally support us moving forward and acknowledge that it's a multi-year question.
And Dave?
Dave, when you're talking about this plan, and I fully support that, did I hear correctly in your initial start that you said that we need to move this as soon as possible to work this present plan? Because if we stave this off for another 30 days, we are going to be in serious issue about trying to get those people placed into this plan that is presently presented, correct?
It's not like we would be in June or July at this point where we're in dire straits in terms of trying to find good candidates at that point, but we're getting pretty close if you wait another 30 days. Like this is this is the good hiring window that, and we've actually felt the positive effects of that in special ed, where we've been able to hire 9 of our 12 open positions so far.
With that thought in mind, I think, and in what I've heard already from the board members, is I think that this needs to be moved to an action item and that we do something with this.
Is that a formal motion, Dave?
Yes, it is.
Then I second it.
Is there any discussion on that? You look
Yeah.
like you want to say something.
Yeah, I do, and it could wait till the action item, but I'll just get it out of the way now. I just want to go back again to, as you make it an action item and as you move it forward, to be crystal clear what you're adding and what the costs are, because next year, if there are challenges in the budget based on not getting the funding that we think we're going to need to, we're going to want to have a clear trail as to what the decision was made and what the impact was. And so just making it really clear. I'm not diminishing the need or saying it's a bad idea. Just because of the uncertainty, it has to be really clear what's being authorized and what the actual cost of it's going to be, because it will impact the budget that you need to approve in June.
Okay, Brian?
Thanks for that, Jeff. Kind of to Lisa's point, I think that we're understanding that we could be looking at deficit spending. I think we understand what we're up against. I'm also taking a little bit, honestly, a leap of faith with the Minnesota. They've been incredible in terms of support behind everything that's gone on. I'm bringing somewhat of a faith that they're going to continue to support that, regardless of what our situation may become fall. But I think it's something that, point taken, Jeff, I just feel in agreement with Lisa and her points that we know what we're looking at. I just think it's something we need to do.
I think Lisa had also said an important point, which is that as we talk about this in multiple years, and we know that this is an ongoing discussion, that doesn't mean this is always an add staff ongoing discussion, that this is us looking at, we're putting staff in right now as a Band-Aid as we look deeper and how to create those supports that we need long-term to move forward with this. And so knowing that that's our goal, I guess I'm okay moving this forward. Jeff?
I think everybody from previous discussions has displayed an understanding of the fact that this is not special ed reimbursed, even though they are reimbursable. We will be paying out of the general fund because we're over the cap. Okay. Just want to get that out there again. Okay.
No, I think, Jeff, I think those are really good points to make. And having an eye towards the budget moving forward, to echo everybody's point, we need to think about it not only for the tactical solution that we're putting in right now, but what is our long-term solution. Right now, I think we all have the feeling, this is how I feel. I've heard this echoed from others. I don't presume to speak for others, but for myself, I see this as a large enough problem right now that I want to take steps to begin resolving it. That's what I see this as, nothing more. This is taking steps to begin moving towards our, 10th iteration that we will need to take to get there. It's not just going to be, well, we're going to do this, and then next we're going to do one more thing and it's going to be fixed. Well, no, realistically, it's probably not. It's probably going to be 3, 4, 6, 12 iterations down the line as we continue to learn and tweak, and as our population changes, and as we start taking into account budget impacts and everything else. Because the facts are the facts. I know the state of Minnesota had a $1.5 billion surplus, and now that was pre-COVID-19. Now who knows what that's going to look like? We know what our money looks like. We know we got 2% and 2% with the last legislature. We don't know what that's going to look like next time. For those of us that have been through the budgeting process, we know where that gets us in our budget. if we get 2% and 2%, we know how far that gets us. So but for me, it's crystal clear, what we're moving forward here. And I'm usually very conservative, and this is a big enough issue for me where I'm like, this is a prime use case for spending some of the money that we have available.
Yep. Stephanie?
I agree with Scott, and I do tend to lean more on the conservative side as well when it comes to finances. It's a need. And so my outlook on it is, yeah, we may be taking a slight gamble with our finances, but these hires are going to be used to create that strategic plan, and we need them in order to move forward.
Any more discussion? So then I guess we have a motion on the table to move this to an action item.
Seconded it in 2 weeks.
Yep, and a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So I'm not sure, Becky, does this automatically get moved, or do you work magic in board book to move this, or should I mark down that we need to remember to come back?
I tried to work magic, so we'll see if it worked or not. And
Okay.
At any rate, I have made a
It's
note.
not there yet.
It may be something
Okay.
that you need to actually close out and come back to, but we'll
Okay.
see what happens.
All right, thank you. Okay, so then that finishes up our discussion items, and so now we'll move into administrative reports, beginning with superintendent. Muted, Jeff.
There we go. A couple of brief items here. Once again, we talked about there was no news on the executive order that we're planning on having staff report on May 1st till we're told otherwise. I've been doing a regular Wednesday update on our 3 big projects that we have going on in our mission right now. So I'll give you one here for the record again, quick today. Today we delivered 4,492 meals. We're applying for this open summer program. Again, the waiver, we don't actually qualify for this program normally because we don't have a free and reduced rate above 50%, but we are taking advantage of a waiver. So we're applying for that again, and we believe that we'll be awarded that to continue out through the rest of the school year if necessary. We have been averaging 40 students served, or a little over 40 each day for the childcare for emergency workers. Today it was 27 in tier 1 and 13 in tier 2. Kind of the big news is when we started about 3 weeks ago with the distance learning, we had about 350 kids that did not have a device in their hands. Part of that was because we're not one-to-one and elementary students didn't go into this emergency with devices in their hands. So we very deliberately staged the handouts from secondary to elementary. And we also worked with kids making connection in the distance learning, finding out what their status was for internet connectivity, and used everything from hotspots to showing them how to set up their phone as a hotspot, and redistributing was a big part of what we did with devices. So going from 350 and 250, as of, I believe we were down to 1 student who did not have a device in the entire district and 0 that don't have access to the internet. And the 1 student has a device, they just haven't come in to pick it up yet. They're waiting for it to pick up. So it's really, everybody is connected now. And that's a big shift. A lot of work, at each site went into making that happen and doing it in a real controlled fashion, in a safe fashion. So, I see a thumbs up and applause, well-deserved. Question that came up was, as far as our attendance and have we made contact with every kid? We know we have some kids who are literally living with a relative in another state or in northern Minnesota, but they're participating in distance learning and they're connected. They have what they need, so that's great. At the elementary level this week, there were 3 individual students that the site leadership thought were not participating enough and maybe needed, a wellness check or what have you. So my understanding is that happened this year and the resources in the community were used to that. I didn't hear any follow-up, but that's still a concern. So we really think we're at virtually 100% connectivity, 100% participation, and that bodes really well for our funding being consistent through the rest of the year. If all these things stay as consistent as they have been the last 3 weeks, we're going to end the year in really good shape. On the construction side, which is the next item there, but I wasn't looking up. Were there any questions on the first thing before I move on? Okay, sorry. And this on the construction, we had some discussion about the parking lot for the high school activities being approved. There was some doubt that it would be approved by Nininger Township last night. And it turns out that Wold worked with the engineer firm from the township and accepted a recommendation that we move down to one entrance exit from that parking lot. Those on the facilities committee know that that's where it was all along, that it was an improvement recommended by Wold to do 2 driveways in and out of that parking lot. And so my understanding is, it was confirmed by the clerk there and by Kyle Edston again today, that Nininger Township did approve to proceed with the parking lot, but that is now back to one entrance, and that the design will try to feature a wide enough entrance so that it's actually 2-way traffic. But it starts to get into a whole other issue with the 2 separate drives and how it impacts the road and the right of way and the drainage and everything. So facilities committee can talk about if that's an issue at their next meeting, but it seems like just going back to where we were a couple weeks ago is probably acceptable to keep things moving. And I'll pause to see if there's any comment on that one. And I think that's actually the entire superintendent report then for today.
Do you have any questions or comments on that? Lisa?
Yeah, the only comment I have is I wanted to say thanks to Jen Schubert for maintaining that cumulative report on the bond. It just really feels like a nice dashboard and helps me have nice monthly checkpoints. And then I appreciated that this month's packet included the project summary reports from Wold, so just 1-page items on our bigger bids. I just found that one personally interesting information, and as we taper down towards the end of the bond, I think it's really valuable. And I felt it was presented really clearly. So I just wanted to thank both Wold and Jen for building to this point, and I anticipate we'll keep it going forward. It's very helpful.
All right, so building construction fund project update, you had already covered that, but is there anything else that we need to add for that point?
With Wold last week, and we just wanted to share just what Lisa had highlighted, that to look at each aspect of the construction, and we also have for you to approve the change order, and you have the details on the change order in the packet a little bit later on in the consent agenda. Change order 11.
All right, and then student enrollment.
It's important for us to not lose any students. Fortunately, it's a favorable situation. We just have to make sure that the students connect at some point within 15 days so that we don't have to withdraw them. And obviously, if we get some announcement like, hey, the school year is going to end on May 1st, you say this decision's made that we're not coming back. If you had a lot of students just stop participating for the month of May, that could have a financial impact. So we're waiting for that word, and then we really want to get out in front with our communication of how important it is for kids to continue to connect and make progress. And hopefully we can tie that to what it means for next year if we're fortunate enough to have an indication of what it means for next year. So we'll keep showing that enrollment because it's still what's paying the bills, even though we're doing it in a completely upside down world right now.
All right, thank you. Next up is school board committee reports, and the only report we have in here is the facilities committee. And so I had done this write-up, and Jeff had given the quick update about the parking lot, which we had just found out today. But basically, the facilities committee has met twice since our last regular meeting, and it was really to discuss, the first meeting was to discuss the priorities for the remainder of the bond. And in order to come up with those decisions, we had kind of weighed the input from CAM, as well as input that we had gotten from the facilities committee and Tim in the fall. And so we had kind of come up with our priorities. Specifically, we talked about privacy bathrooms, working on privacy showers, talking about whether we were doing 1 or 2 of the security entrances. At the time of the first meeting at the beginning of April, there was about $5.7 million in unallocated fund dollars. That does not include the early childhood updates that we had already approved. That hasn't come out of that number yet. And then after that, our second meeting was with Mike Johnson in order to discuss, since we had talked about the privacy bathrooms and showers at the high school, to kind of discuss his priorities with the high school, to discuss the second security entrance with him, where he would want privacy bathrooms, where he saw those being most beneficial and things like that. Talking about how to weigh privacy as well as working on that piece. He was worried about student vaping, so that supervision piece. And so Wold is going to be coming back with us. They're going to work with him a little bit and try to come up with an idea that would hit the supervision piece as well as the privacy piece. And then they'll bring that back to the facility committee. So for now, we don't have necessarily the complete specifics on it, but we knew that was a priority. So we're continuing to work forward with that. So did you have something to add?
No, other than the fact that we're getting in a nice rhythm. I think facilities is getting in a rhythm, and I would anticipate, we're going to get back on every 4 or 5 weeks. We'll raise a question, will be raised. We'll bring alternatives, and this will be a common report for the next year plus, I think.
So we've talked about really wanting to meet at least once a month to keep moving forward with these bond dollars and get the updates and then make the next decision. And like Lisa said, have a rhythm to it. So are there any questions on it? We'll just keep keeping you posted. So we can move on to action items. So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Question? Nope. Okay. So all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So now we'll move into the change orders. Jeff, do you have anything you want to talk about the change orders? Or?
Yeah, we went through the change order with Kyle and Scott from Ewald, and basically it's stuff that was from before I arrived here that was planned to go a certain way, and as they go through the actual completion, they discover things and have to make changes, in favorable or unfavorable in the budget. So these are just routine findings, and they were all described to myself, to me, and to Jen Subert at the meeting, and nothing stood out as being other than the cost of doing business.
Okay. Then do we have a motion to approve the change orders?
So move.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And carries. All right, bills payable. Do we have a motion to pay our bills?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Same sign. Motion carries. So next we have a personnel report. And this will require a roll call vote.
Is that this one or is that the item a little bit further down?
That's further
The
down.
agenda does not need
Oh,
to.
okay, wait. All right, further down. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the personnel report? And so this is probationary teachers that will be continuing.
Well, and it also includes some regular hires and resignations and retirements. Yeah.
Two personnel items in the consent agenda and just a regular vote to approve. Be pulled out for discussion.
Okay. Oh, I'm all turned around. Oh, we don't need that because we just approved the consent agenda. I apologize. All right, individual items for action, donation report for the Hastings School District. So I believe we do need to do a resolution read for donations to accept the donations.
Yep, and I have it right here if we're ready for me to read that.
Ed.
Okay. So I, Stephanie Mullum, introduce the following resolution and move for its adoption. Resolution for acceptance of donations. Whereas the reference donations in the District 200 donations report from January to March 2020 have been generously donated. Can I get a second? Becky Beisel duly seconded the motion for adoption of the foregoing resolution. Voting in favor of the resolution, I will do a roll call. Becky Beisel,
Yes.
Brian Davis,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes, and thank you very much.
Scott Gergen,
Yes.
Stephanie Malm, yes. Dave Hall,
Yes.
Kelsey Waits. Or be it resolved by the Hastings Public School District School Board to gratefully accept these gifts. Fantastic. Thank you that donated.
Thank you very much. I'm always just so grateful for the generosity of our community. It's truly great. Okay, so we have a couple of policies to go over. This is the second read of these policies, and so we can also adopt them tonight. So the first is 206A, which is the addendum for speaking at a school board meeting. Policy 210 is conflict of interest. 34 is unpaid meal charges. And 710A is transportation permission form. Jeff?
Clarification, it appeared that as we got into all the disruption, that the policy committee actually was taking feedback from the full board and wanted to make some minor modifications to policies 210, 534, and 710 addendum A. 206A appeared to be ready to adopt. And so the recommendations are to for a motion to review and adopt 206A, and then to actually move the remaining policies to a third reading so that they could have come for a vote at the next meeting after the committee has a chance to work on them. So that was my understanding. Once again, we hit into we were on a rhythm as Lisa described, and then we ran into these other things, and so we have to kind of get back onto our footing with that. So you can have as many readings as you want. They are eligible to approve as they are right now. If you're not ready to do that, then just move those after the first one, move them to a third reading and deal with them at the next meeting. And once again, the urgency behind getting the transportation waiver and the lunch account thing taken care of was because we wanted those policies to be engaged this year. Now, the urgency is not quite the same as it was, so to take a little extra time should not impact us at all.
Right. So, Lisa?
So this is probably outside the rules of order. When I read the 4 policies as they stand, I didn't see any remaining questions on 210 either. I felt comfortable with 206A and 210 being approved after a second reading. After this second reading, I did have questions that on the 2 remaining pieces. But
Yes.
would the recommendation? I'm sorry. Would the motion be all in a block, or are we going to do a motion on each one separately?
I mean, you
all
could
in a block,
motion
Jeff?
to approve.
Block if you want to. If there's no changes, you can move to do it in a block.
And so we know I have written down notes for suggestions that the board had and questions the board had for the other 2 policies, 534 and 710. We just have not met as a policy committee since the board made those. So,
yeah, and I don't, I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, we talked about it and they totally blew us off. But I'm just saying I didn't see anything in 210. I don't know if you had any comments in 210.
I didn't have any comments in 210.
So did anybody else have any comments in 210? I'm going to make a motion to adopt policy 206 addendum A and policy 210 and adopt those today and defer policy 534 and policy 710 addendum A for a 3rd reading.
Second.
Okay. Do we have any discussion? Those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right. So the policy committee will get on that, and I think we have a tentative date set for May the 4th, which that's just my favorite day to say in that way, for no particular reason. Conveyance of parcel at Todd Field. I'm glad I can make you laugh, Scott.
Yeah, you got me with that one. That's one of our favorite in our house as well.
Yep.
And thank you for cheering me up before we talk about this next item, because it makes me crabby how much we're being charged for this parcel. But anyway.
I was hoping we were going to get by without that discussion, Scott, because it doesn't make me happy either, but
you know me better than that.
I would love to. I mean, I don't like to buy my way out of problems, but I kind of want us to just buy our way out of this and be done talking about it. I'm willing to accept it, maybe.
Jeff, did you have something?
I'll just set them up and then let you take it from there. The first one, once again, is the land underneath the concession stand. And that appeared to be, where you wanted it, but something you were willing to live with. And then we just put it aside while we worked on the land under the parking lot and that issue with MnDOT and the fact that the lease was so high. So I'm just bringing back all those descriptions of that conveyance of that first parcel. We would have to get the legal agreement drawn up. If you approve it, we'll get the legal agreement drawn up. And then it will look like the second one, which is the actual lease to own agreement that has been modified so that the payments that you make, if you choose to make them, will be applied to a purchase while the construction is done.
Because I hate it either, but I'm willing to say let's motion to get this done. And I'm just tired of looking at it and frustrated that we're stuck in this kind of position. And this is the only way I can see we're going to get out of it. And I make a motion with it, we proceed.
Second that.
Discussion? I don't know. Yeah,
Just-
I'm with you about
yeah.
the cost there.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that if they were to put that on the market right now, that that is the amount of money they would get for that piece of land. But did you want to add something, Scott?
Brian raised his hand. I did not. So Brian, go ahead.
Thanks, Scott. I just have a question. I just, from everybody's perspective, I just want to get way in here. Have we exhausted every possible avenue to try? I mean, that cost just. Are we done? I mean, have we exhausted everything?
I think we're done. I mean, I think honestly, looking at those two pieces together and getting a lease to own
Yeah.
on the piece under the parking lot is absolutely the best case that we can get.
Right.
And where I sort of ended up this morning as I looked at these one more time, is I decided to avert my eyes from these singular items and consider it cost to the improvement of Todd Field. So I might say, oh, I don't love how much, the flagpole costs. I don't know, something that I don't even know if we paid for that, but I'm just going to avert my eyes from the singular item and say, this is a piece of the cost of the Todd Field improvement.
Right. And that's a great point, Lisa. I kind of equated it to, it was a sunk cost that was just not recognized until we did the improvement to Todd Field. So it's kind of like when you do a remodel on your house and they come in and they say, oh, by the way, you need smoke detectors everywhere in the house. You can't get a permit. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm putting in a new water heater. What are you talking about? It's kind of along that same vein. And I really want to that in mind, along with the point that the state is working with us on the lease to own. That was huge. They didn't have to do that. Right. So I feel that we have done our due diligence on this, and that without expending a lot more money and building up a whole lot of eliminating any goodwill that we have, because this is not going to be the last time that we're dealing with the city and the state and the county as they start messing with Highway 55, and as we deal with the sidewalk and the retaining wall on Highway 61 and all these other pieces. I feel like if we keep fighting about it, save $20,000 maybe, but are we going to then lose that goodwill on something down the line? Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's tough for me to swallow.
Yeah, and I do think with. Oh, sorry. Continue.
It's you need to look at the complete package, not just at the one line item, I guess, is what I'm following my own advice here. So.
And I do think that we need to thank our elected representatives for this one, because I know that lease to own is not something that the state would normally do. And so the representatives really advocated for us on that point. And so it's important to acknowledge that and make sure to thank them. So with that, there is a motion and a second on the floor. So is there,
You should probably do each separately because they're land purchases.
I think that was a question that I actually had, was on Dave's motion. It's the motion, the current motion is to accept conveyance of the parcel.
That's correct. The first,
okay,
that's where I wanted to start.
That's what you intended.
And then everybody
perfect.
else started. We need to do the concession stand parcel first.
So then with that, with a motion to accept the lease with purchase, conveyance of parcel at Todd Field. I'm just clicking too many things now. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So next up is the lease with purchase option of parcel at Todd Field. And so we've already kind of discussed this, but if there's anything else, otherwise we can put a motion on the floor and then have discussion.
Now I will make the second motion that we deal with the property where the parking lot area is for the lease to own, and I'll make that motion that we move that ahead.
Second.
there any discussion? All right. Well, thank you again to our elected officials. And with that, all those in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Our next item is a resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contract of the probationary teachers. This one will require a resolution be read, but Jeff, would you be able to kind of go through the process? I know we've had questions about this from the community before about how this works and who determines, the status of teachers and things like that.
Okay, so this is statutory, and it has to do with the continuing contract status of teachers. Teachers are required to go through 120 days of teaching in a year through a 3-year probationary phase, or if they were tenured, or the current legal term is put on a continuing contract in another district in the state of Minnesota, then they go through a 1-year probationary period. So there's 2 actions that are put out here right now. One of them is a resolution that needs a roll call vote to non-renew the staff that are identified there. And they were all notified the same day as we ended our 3rd evaluation for those staff. Their individual supervisor did notify them all that this would be an action that was forthcoming. Second action that can be a regular vote, does not need to be a resolution or a roll call vote. And that is just to formally acknowledge that other probationary staff are moving to their next probationary year, or for those that have been on a continuing contract elsewhere and have made it through their year probation, or those that have done 3 consecutive years of qualifying experience in the Hastings district, you will be formally approving that they will go on a continuing contract. And once again, you've heard the term tenure before. That's not used in the statute or in legal descriptions anymore. But it's essentially what it means. It means you're giving them an ongoing contract that can only be ended for cause in the future. An unrequested leave of absence based on what's in the master agreement. So once again, this is all based on statute and the Hastings Teacher Development and Evaluation Plan that's approved by the board and approved by the Teachers Association, how we go about evaluating. All that was done on a very tight timeline, which is fortunate because we don't have to use any of the exceptions that are in the governor's executive agreement, because we completed the observations before that disruption. So now this is making a clear record for all eternity that says this is the status of these teachers. Whenever it's ambiguous, the teacher has the opportunity to challenge it, and it gets very messy. So we're being very clear. Any teacher that's on this resolution for non-renewal does have the option to request a reason from the school board. However, don't have a right to challenge the decision. So they'd be given a reason that's basically already been shared with them in their performance evaluations. So that's it in a nutshell. If there's any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, once again, the first one's a resolution by roll call vote, and the second one is just making a record of promoting those people to their next year of probation or to their continuing contract status.
For a point of clarification on the second point, Jeff, that list of probationary teachers and who was moving after 1, 2, and 3 years was included in the consent agenda item. Have we already taken that action, or are we taking 2 actions now? Action being the recognition that probationary teachers are advancing in their cycle. I think that happened under consent, but maybe I was wrong.
Yep, in the personnel report.
Yeah, let me take a look. You might be right about that. Let me just take a look.
There's 2 items here. There's the 4/22/2020 personnel information, and then the probationary status of with a date on it of 4/17. So the one I'm looking at is the 4/17, and it calls out, hey, probationary year 1 of 3 completed, continuing on, and then it lists our staff name and their building name.
It only needs to show up in one place, but because it wasn't the personnel report and it's not tied to that statute or to that resolution, then you've already covered in the consent agenda. And that's why we wanted to get you those early so that if you had questions, you could ask those ahead of time. So the point of emphasis was making sure that there's a record. In this case, we doubled up, which is better than not putting it in there at all. So that's done, and you just can do the resolution if you so intend.
Okay. So Becky, you have
I
a
just have a
question?
question on, I'm new. So for these probationer teachers, is it just the principals making these decisions? Do the team members of, so if it's a social studies team, do they make the decisions together? Or is it just the principals making these decisions? How do they come about these decisions on not renewing the contracts?
It is just the principal. However, depending on the assignment, if they are shared between sites or other itinerant assignment, they may have multiple people doing the evaluations. But a licensed administrator has done at least 3 evaluations this year following our teacher development and evaluation plan. I do know that the TDE team gets together and they review the staff. They're looking for inter-rater reliability, make sure that it's consistent between the sites. And so there has been teamwork and there has been collaboration on making the determination, but it is licensed administrator who does 1 to 3 of those total of 3 evaluations and makes the final recommendation. They review those with me, and now I'm making the recommendation to the board, and you're the final step on whether you accept that recommendation or not.
The questions?
And I just reinforce, it's a very detailed process. This isn't like one day it's thumbs up or thumbs down. This is, in some cases, a 3-year-long process, but for, at a minimum, a full year long of in-depth evaluation according to the agreed plan. So a lot of work goes behind the scenes on this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's my first time doing this.
Just for clarification, there really is no change to this process and procedure, is there, from what we've done in previous years, correct?
I think the only change is trying to make sure that there is a crystal clear record in the board record of people who are moving to another probationary year or to continuing contract, because oftentimes they'll know they're coming back. And then when a decision is made about them in the future, they'll say, oh, I was already on a continuing contract, or I was moved to, I only needed 1 more probationary year. So having that record is critical, because it's not today when you need it, it's next year when somebody goes to the Teachers Association and said, oh, I think they have it all wrong. You go back and pull this out. So that's the only thing that we've changed. Otherwise, you've done the same resolution. It followed the same TD&E plan probably for 4 or 5 years since it was adopted by statute when that new process was put in place.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So at this point, we will move forward with the resolution.
All right. Bear with me. So I, Stephanie Malm, introduce the following resolution and move for its adoption. Resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contract of probationary teachers. Whereas Lori Hedinger, Adam Hertz, Samantha Hull, Kimberly Lawn, Anna Lytle, Stacy Robellard, Jane Sanders, Joanna Teagland, Beth Wilson, and Kelsey Wormley are probationary teachers in Independent School District 200. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District 200 that pursuant to Minnesota Statute 122A.40 Subdivision 5, that the teaching contracts of can I read these names and because there is one status change? Jeff, looking for guidance here.
I think the status change is just a change to the percentage of time.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. I defer.
For the, so the resolution, just do, yeah. Yeah, because you're not giving a reason for them not being renewed. It could be, we have less kids in that grade or whatever. So we're just basically saying that the position that they had as a probationary teacher is not being offered to them for next year, or they're coming back, or they're being offered a position at a reduced
rate.
So you
Okay.
keep those together because it comes under the same statute.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so that the probationary teachers in Independent School District 200 are hereby terminated or reduced at the close of the current 2019 to 2020 school year as identified above. Be it further resolved that written notice be sent to the school teachers regarding termination and non-renewal of their contract as provided by the law, and that said notice shall be substantially the following form, and then it goes on to discuss the verbiage that they will receive fully in writing. I believe at this time, can I get a second?
So moved.
Scott Gergen duly seconded the motion for the adoption of the foregoing resolution. Voting in favor of the resolution, we will do a roll call. Becky Beisel?
No.
Davis?
Yes.
Lisa Hedin?
Yes.
Scott Gergen?
Yes.
Stephanie Malm? Yes. Dave Pemble?
Yes.
Kelsey Waits?
Yes.
Therefore, be it resolved by the Hastings Public School District School Board to for the non-renewal of the teaching contracts.
Okay. So our next item is a proposal to charge program fees for extended day and preschool childcare provided for the families of emergency workers. And so this is something we had discussed previously and decided against. It was back up tonight to just have further discussion on it, understanding that the board's position may not have changed. Jeff?
I'll introduce why I'm making the recommendation, because there's also a recommendation that the board should resolve to commit to these community ed staff that are doing childcare, that we will retain them throughout the remainder of this school year, even though they have lost essentially 85% of their funding. It is the one area of the district that under the current projection, well, we'll have to cover a loss, and it's a loss that obviously was not created by community ed. However, because they normally fund themselves with 85% of their budget by fees that they can no longer access, they have built a substantial fund balance through their good management and their good programming. This is one area where they can feel like they're getting some control back over being able to charge for something. The executive order is clear that we cannot charge for the childcare during the school day. Both the first and second executive order have allowed us to charge for extended day. And then the second order allowed us to open back up preschool childcare if we so desired. And so we are offering the extended day, and now we are also offering the preschool childcare. Both of those can charge, we can't charge the regular fee under these executive orders. I think it's a step back towards normalcy, and knowing that you want a dollar of revenue wherever you can get it, because the executive order is giving you expenses that you can't recoup in revenue in other places. So every time you have an opportunity to do it, I think that you should. It's also the fact that this service is provided to people who are emergency workers. So that means that they are working and have been working regularly. So paying that fee is not going to be something that is a, you would expect would be difficult for them, and they have other ways to present their need to community ed. So this is one of the things that we can kind of return to normalcy. So I'm recommending that we do that. I understand that is a change from where we started out on the executive order with very little notice. We've had more time to understand this and the impacts on the budget. So I think it's time to consider making that adjustment. It's also a good time for you to reinforce that you're going to absorb the costs of everything related to that executive order if that's where the board is at right now. I think both are acceptable. We just want to clarify now because we're a month deep into this now. So in other words, if nobody moves and seconds it to a vote, then it's just gonna sit there and that's acceptable too.
So is there someone who wants to make a motion to charge program fees? Being no motion on the table, I guess we do. Oh, Scott.
Can we table this because this is an ongoing situation? So saying that we don't have a motion this meeting may be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if this continues another month and another month
right.
and into the fall? And, I mean, those are not out of the realm of possibilities. So I just want to make sure that
I was going to table it.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Stephanie?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
And I just, to clarify, this is just for the extended day. So during the regular hours, we're not charging. So I just think too, going back to Jeff's point, that charge would be for, say we were back in session and as childcare provided afterwards, through Kids Campus or whatever option they choose. These are also individuals that are working. So I agree that it can be tabled at this time. But knowing that I also agree with Jeff's point that this is a good step in the future moving forward to normalcy.
Ryan?
I just wanted to identify, I do see Jeff's point about responder, whoever happens to be is working, but we don't know that the other individual in the household's working. Maybe they normally were, and now they're not. So it's hard to know what the household balance is, but I do agree with Scott that, Kelsey, table it, because if it becomes a new normal, if this becomes our new normal and we're kind of going back and forth in and out of these situations going forward for a while, then we may want to be revisited at that time.
Concur with tabling it. I'd like to see this added as an item for our May work session. I would hope that at that point we've got clarity about what the end of this school year looks like and what the state's expectations may or may not be regarding schools providing childcare going into the summer. And I'd like us to be able to have a discussion as a group prior to making any decisions in May, rather than just having it come as a open recommendation. So I would like to see this as a topic in our work session. So be interested to hear if I see Carrie Gore has joined our meeting. I'd be interested if she has anything at this point.
To say that I'm keeping an eye on what's happening around the state, and it's kind of a mixed bag right now with districts deciding to charge for before and after care and for the preschool. So whatever we decide tonight, whether it's tabling or what have you, I think that's an acceptable way to move forward.
Thank you, Carrie.
Right. So we do have a motion now to table from Scott.
Discussion. I'll come in at discussion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
And I just, I'm comfortable with the decision. I just want to make sure that you understand that if you table it, the parliamentary procedures to table it definitely. So you're going to table it to the May meeting or whatever. You could still deal with it at the work session, but because this is a regular meeting, you'll table it definitely to the May meeting, then you'll have to pull it from the table. And that's fine. Any fees that you could have collected for a month, obviously that window of opportunity is gone. I think you all realize that. And the executive order applies to free childcare during the school year. So that'll end unless we get another executive order that will be back to normal on childcare when the school year ends. And so then you may not have a decision to make on extended care because it'll go right along with it. So the decision in May probably won't have much impact because it'll probably be superseded by whatever the end of the school year or the next executive order. So this is your chance now to recoup some of those costs. But if you want to stick with the original, just supporting of the community, then table it definitely, and you can dismiss it at the next meeting if there's no reason to bring it back.
Okay. So is there any more discussion? Otherwise, we will take a vote on tabling this until the May meeting.
I only want to make sure that Scott's comfortable with that modification of his motion.
Yes, that was actually my intent, is that we pick this up again in a month. And again, we may be right back in the same position where we table it again, but we'll have hopefully more information at that time. Yep, totally fine with that.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Carries. Next is a resolution to transfer from our general fund to community education. Jeff?
Yep. And once again, these are not recommendations because I'm trying to sway the board one way or another. We're putting them in a recommendation form so that they proceed to whatever outcome you'd like it to be. And of course, we're having conversations pretty much daily about the impacts on the budget, how the programs are going. And so as we've watched districts react differently, because community education is the one area that was not protected by the governor's executive order, we could furlough that staff, and we talked about that at the emergency, or at the work session. It has been kind of the consensus of the board, I believe, to support those community ed workers, and knowing that furloughing them would gain about 3 weeks of savings. We also know that they are uniquely qualified to be providing this childcare right now. They're doing it under stressful conditions. They're doing an excellent professional job. And so doing a resolution now would be non-binding, but it would be a show of support that you intend to do the budget transfer resolution in June to reduce the impact on community ed. Once again, they've done a nice job of building up a fund balance, but they would be losing a great deal of their fund balance to pay for childcare, which is not something that they brought on. But a fund balance is there for a rainy day. This is obviously a rainy day. So in working through this with Jen Subert and Carrie Gore, we felt like if you were intending to give the employees some confidence, know that they don't have to look for jobs, to boost their morale, to thank them for doing this childcare job, that this resolution would provide that reassurance to them, and also that the game plan would be whatever the actual loss is that's incurred in Fund 4, half will come out of the fund balance that they built up, because it's a rainy day fund, even though it's not their fault. This is a rainy day. And the other half would come out of the general fund. And of course, your surplus in the general fund, rainy day fund for. So that's the recommendation that the three of us have come up with. I know that's why one of the reasons why Carrie is tuned in. She wants to be available to you to discuss this. And once again, it doesn't have to move forward. It's just there to as an opportunity for you to consider supporting them in this fashion. The actual resolution would come in June, and it would have dollars attached to it.
Dave? Oh, you're muted, Dave.
This, I think I would go ahead and support the idea of the resolution 2020-1, knowing that those actions will come to us in the June meeting.
I second
Do
it.
we need, okay. Do we need to read through the resolution?
It's not binding, so you don't have to. A roll call vote, though, even though it's not binding, would be appropriate. If you want to read it, it certainly is fair game. But once again, it's a non-binding resolution.
I do have a question before we get to the vote, but
Yep, so we'll open this for discussion and then go ahead. What's your question?
okay. So my question is just about the likely scale. Looking at the 2019-2020 revised budget, it looks like the community ed's balance was in the few $100,000 range. What do we anticipate? And I hope Jen Subert maybe can weigh in this general scale, the likely scale of this money movement would be.
Sure. So I did do some estimates and it's looking to be at about 150,000, which would be, that's the half. So that would be coming from the general fund to community ed. And community ed would also be covering 150,000 then.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. So at this point, we'll do a roll call vote.
So,
Yes.
Yes.
Scott Gergen,
Yes.
Lisa Hidian,
Yes.
yes, Dave Pemble,
Yes.
Kelsey Waits.
Yes. Okay. So our next item, but not our last, even though board book is trying to trick me, is a proposal to increase high school student participation fees for fiscal year 2021. Oh, Jeff.
Okay, so I'll just introduce this again. This is coming from the work sessions that we've had with Trent Hanson, discussion about fees for next year. Of course, we don't know what next year will look like yet, but Trent does know that if we're going to have activities next year, he would like to know by the end of the May meeting if we're increasing fees. I put it on here as an action item because I think the recommendation is pretty clear. If you choose not to act today, you have another month to absorb this recommendation and think about whether you'd like to act on it in May. But that would be when we would need the action if you intend to raise fees for next year. I know I'm on a theme here all night long, and the theme is you have very low activity fee rates. They're not differentiated currently between the cost per participant for the sport. And ultimately, we're paying for a lot of things tonight in these recommendations. At some point, you have to have revenue coming in, and you want the revenue most often to be tied to a service that is being received. Have a family cap, and you have scholarships for people who are in either of those, who have financial need. So this is just trying to match the cost of the activity better to the cost of running the activity, and making sure that as we try to support these different areas of these different funds, that they don't all end up having expenses going out that you're supporting and we're not doing anything about the revenue side, because there'll be a day of reckoning coming, and it won't be much fun for anybody. So I think it's a fee increase is overdue. It's been a great value, but it's still a good value with an increase. And I would recommend that you go with the maximum 3-tier increase that Trent has and that recommendation. And I'm really making that to get the ball rolling, to get your discussion going, decide if you want to tackle it this month or next month or not at all. And if you want to find another space in there for the actual fees. So that's the point of keeping us on track time-wise with making this recommendation.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the 3-tier structure at this point? Or on the other hand, would someone like to make a motion to table this until next month?
I would like to make a motion to table this to our May session, and I would like this to be an item at our May work session, because I don't feel that I have quite enough of an understanding to be able to support this intelligently one way or another.
I second that motion. The
Dave,
same
I saw your
feeling.
hand up.
That was what I was going to do a second.
Yeah.
I thought it needed to be tabled and we could look at it a little closer.
I would like to continue having discussions on it as well. So, any discussion on the motion to table? Brian?
Couldn't find my mute. Sorry about that. I am just checking. So Trent can still get the communication out that he needs to if we make a determination by our meeting in May, correct? Okay, because I don't want to keep kicking this can down the road. Okay, thanks.
I said he just needs to know by the May meeting. So we do have time. Is there any more discussion? At this point, all those in favor of tabling this until next month, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And so the last bit is the proposal for the staffing increases in special services that we discussed with Dave Haveman. And whatever motion we make, we just need to make sure it's very clear for Becky so that she can get that written down. And so we know exactly what is being approved. So Scott?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the proposal put forth by Dave Haveman as stated for the short-term staff additions as outlined in his proposal.
Is that clear enough, Becky?
Yes.
Nice job, Scott.
You're good, Scott.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. So all those in favor of Dave Haveman's recommendations?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign? And carries. The last up is our future meeting schedule. So we have the facility committee meeting again. So that's our regular work session. Finance committee and self-funded insurance are also two committees that will be meeting. And our process at this point is that these committee meetings are being recorded and they are posted to our website. And then they're removed the following month so that they're there for people to see for a month, which in general, people aren't sitting in on our committee meetings. And so I think this is just added transparency with that. Oh, and we just added the policy meeting on, it's not May 4th, it's May the 4th, May the 4th.
Just a question for you. Do we have a template? I saw your note come out about meeting minutes and kind of your suggestion as to who would take that on. Do we have a template that we can use to fulfill that duty?
Yeah.
And if we don't right this moment, that's fine. Even if we have, I know we had some examples come out earlier and I thought they were pretty solid. So I just want to conform to a standard, not have everybody off doing their own thing, because I guarantee you I'll come up with something stupid that won't conform to anything. So.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. Jeff, I know you've sent me some examples. Maybe we can go through and figure out which template we want to go with there.
Template, and then we have the mission that was approved for the policy committee that goes right on the template, and one for the facility committee. And so I could send those to everybody as examples, but when the committee meets, if they want to put a mission on there so that they understand why are you meeting and what does this committee do for the full board, you can just put that on there. And these are just examples taken from other places, so you can come up with something. And if the committee likes it, then you share it with the rest of the board. But it does add an extra stamp of see that there's a reason why you're meeting and you're fulfilling it, but you're not wandering off all over the place because you have that committee title. And then you have a nice, neat thing. So it goes into the record, it goes into board book, looks neat, looks like you had a professional meeting and everything. So I think it's a good thing, but it's really however you want to take it. Tonight, I'll send you those 2 examples and every committee can.
That'd be great. And I remember seeing those, and I remember seeing that there was some fairly concise mission statements on there. So that I'm looking at the self-funded healthcare committee. That certainly is something that we could put, in front of them next meeting and just come up with a elevator mission statement.
Or not, it takes less time to do a nice, neat summary than to scramble notes together and try to remember next time. It actually takes less work. So I don't think it's obtrusive.
Not at all.
Okay. Well, so then at this point, if there is nothing else for discussion, we can have a motion to adjourn.
So moved that we adjourn.
Second.
Fighting for that tonight. Okay. All right. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.